For years, fans have wondered what finally pushed Mick Foley away from WWE. Now he's breaking his silence and revealing the real reason behind his departure. According to Foley, it wasn't one big moment that drove him out, but a series of events that kept piling up until he felt he couldn't stay any longer. Back in December, WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley stunned fans when he announced he would not be re-signing his Legends deal due to the company's support of the Trump administration. Just like that, no drawn-out negotiation drama, no contract dispute, no creative differences in the traditional sense. Foley made headlines by criticizing WWE and TKO Group for supporting Donald Trump, and he put his money where his mouth was. And the thing is, this didn't come from nowhere. He described the breakdown as a multitude of different cracks, building ahead of Trump's comments about the late director Rob Reiner. He used a specific image to explain it, a ball-peen hammer on a windshield. He said, "You don't know which tap actually causes the crack, but without a multitude of them, that windshield's not cracking at all. So what was the tap that finally broke it?" For Foley, it was Trump's comments about Rob Reiner, heartless and unbelievably cruel words from the most powerful man in the world, finding joy in how somebody died, belittling a man who had just passed, and somehow tying it into Reiner's dislike of Trump. Rob Reiner, the director, the activist, one of Hollywood's most vocal Trump critics, had died, and instead of silence or even basic respect, Foley watched the response and felt something in him snap. He called it unbelievably cruel comments coming from the most powerful man in the world, finding joy in how somebody died. For him, that was the ball-peen hammer tap that broke the windshield. Now, here's where WWE enters the picture directly. Foley had already been concerned about WWE's close relationship with Donald Trump for several months, especially in light of the administration's ongoing treatment of immigrants. But reading the president's comments in the wake of Rob Reiner's death was the final straw. He went to Instagram. He laid it all out. He wrote that he no longer wished to represent a company that coddles a man so seemingly void of compassion, and that he had informed WWE Talent Relations that he would not be making any appearances for the company as long as Trump remains in office. The fans who saw that post, a lot of them were shocked. This wasn't a guy who'd been feuding with management. Foley last made a WWE TV appearance in 2023, showing up on NXT to announce names for the Iron Survivor Challenge matches. He wasn't on the road every week. He wasn't in anyone's way. He had a quiet Legends deal, a warm relationship with the company, and a name that WWE had been trading on for 3 decades. And he walked away from it. In his Instagram post, Foley confirmed he was under a WWE Legends deal until June, but that he would not be signing a new one when the contract expired. He said he treasured his time with WWE and was grateful for all it gave him, but finished by quoting Popeye, saying, "I stands all I can stands, and I can't stands no more." That line landed differently than most wrestling social media posts do, because everyone who read it understood this man meant it. The hardcore legend further shocked fans when it was announced he'd be joining AEW, appearing at Double or Nothing last month. But we'll get to that. First, we need to understand exactly how deep the roots of this decision ran, and what the WWE-Trump relationship actually looked like from where Foley was standing. There's a phrase Foley kept coming back to in his interview with Ariel Helwani. He used the word cozy, not corrupt, not conspiratorial, just cozy. He went into more detail about his WWE departure, saying he would have felt complicit in his silence if he continued representing WWE while Trump is in office. "I just think WWE had a very cozy relationship, where there was definitely the illusion of a relationship there. The perception, rather." And then he gave the image that sums it up better than any policy debate could. He pointed to WWE's close ties to the administration and said, "I think when 5 different people are posing in the Oval Office and they've all received stone-cold stunners, that's a little cozy. 5 people in the Oval Office. All of them connected to the wrestling business. All of them with a shared history with the man now running the country. That's not a business meeting. That's a family photo." Now, Foley was careful here. He wasn't calling WWE a political arm of the White House. He was describing perception. He was describing what it looks like from the outside and what it felt like from the inside as someone whose name had been part of that organization for over 30 years. A person close to WWE's upper management tried to explain to Foley that Paul "Triple H" Levesque was just on the president's physical fitness board and that Linda McMahon, Trump's Secretary of Education, hadn't worked in WWE in years. Foley wasn't buying it. His response was sharp. He said, "Well, theoretically that's the case, but I could have sworn I saw Paul behind the president's shoulder when he was making a foreign policy announcement. Whether Linda is working with the company or not, her last name is McMahon, and she is associated with the company. Come on, 5 people in that office took a stunner." That's the thing about perception. You can offer all the technical clarifications in the world, but when the visual record is what it is, when you've watched the ceremonies, the photo ops, the press appearances, all the fine print explanations start to feel thin. And for Foley, the problem wasn't that WWE was officially endorsing policy positions in writing. The problem was what staying silent communicated. He said that even though he wasn't technically employed by the company, because he had a Legends deal and because his name had been associated with WWE for over 30 years, he was complicit in his silence. That framing matters. He wasn't pointing a finger at WWE and calling them villains. He was talking about himself, his name, his brand, his reflection in the mirror. The hardcore legend decided he wouldn't make appearances for the company as long as Trump was in office. He believes it's important to have 2 strong political parties in the United States, but Foley feels Trump is a different type of person who has acted in ways that are cruel and selfish. He made that distinction clearly. This wasn't a partisan statement about Republicans versus Democrats. This was about one specific person and the things that person did and said. He put it plainly, he's definitely a different type of person, and I don't mean that in a good way. So when the windshield finally cracked, when the Rayner comments pushed him over, the ground underneath had already been shifting for months. WWE's proximity to power had been making him uncomfortable for a while. The relationship breakdown was a multitude of different cracks, all of them building ahead of that final moment. He reached out, he told them. And then, unlike a lot of people who talk about drawing lines, he actually drew one. Here's where it gets real. Because Foley wasn't walking away from nothing. He acknowledged that by giving up 2 really easy, very high-paying jobs at WrestleMania week for WWE, he had to work 24 hours on his own to make what he could have made in 6. Think about that math. The Legends deal wasn't some ceremonial title. It came with actual work, and that work paid well. WrestleMania weekend is the biggest week on WWE's calendar. A week when legends get flown out, put on panels, hosted at events, and handed checks that most people would be very reluctant to hand back. Foley handed them back. The nostalgia world of conventions and one-man shows had been very kind to Foley financially. So that had been his primary focus anyway. He'd been operating independently for some time, doing the fan convention circuit, the one-man shows, the book appearances. He knew how to make money on his own terms. But the WWE Legends deal was still a significant piece. And he let it go. He said he was good with his decision and that everyone has to make the decision that's right for them. In his case, he didn't want to be in a position where his grandchildren were asking what their grandfather was doing when things were really tough. That sentence, that's the one that cuts through everything else. The championships, the pay-per-view bonuses, the WrestleMania appearances, all of it reduced to a single question from a kid who hasn't been born yet. "Grandpa, what did you do?" He said he wanted his children to be able to say, "This is what Grandpa did." Now WWE did respond informally through internal channels. The head of talent relations told him he respected his decision and would inform the people in charge. And then came the call from higher up. Foley detailed a couple of phone calls he made to unnamed WWE employees and said one top name, who he declined to identify, tried to reason with him. But he stood firm and cut ties. The attempt to reason with him focused on the technical separations. Triple H on the fitness board, Linda no longer employed by the company. Though Foley didn't hear from Paul Levesque or any members of the McMahon family directly, he did speak with an unnamed higher-up who tried to make those arguments, and the two ended their conversation on respectful terms. Respectful terms. That's important to note. Foley has been direct about this. "I love that company. I'm not going to disparage them. It just didn't seem like a good fit. There's no bitterness, no scorched earth. He loves WWE." The relationships he built there, some of them 30-plus years deep, are still intact. He still writes handwritten letters from Santa to WWE's head of talent relations every year. Still sends the videos. This was a man who looked at a situation, decided he couldn't live with it, and made a move. Not out of anger. Out of something quieter and harder to argue with. Self-respect. And he said it plainly. It didn't seem like a fit that would allow him to look at himself in the mirror before he went to bed. To understand why this departure lands the way it does, why fans weren't just surprised, but genuinely moved, you have to understand who Mick Foley is within the context of that company. Mrs. Foley's baby boy became one of WWE's most unlikely success stories under the guise of three distinct personas: the unpredictable Cactus Jack, the demented hippie known as Dude Love, and everyone's favorite mental patient Mankind. These three faces of Foley were dangerously unique, but all shared a common trait: a willingness to always go one step too far. He didn't get to WWE by looking the part. He got there by being impossible to ignore. He began earning attention from larger promotions in the late 1980s as Cactus Jack, though his taste for dangerous stunts left him susceptible to injuries. When he finally got to WWE in 1996, Vince McMahon wasn't a fan of Cactus Jack and wanted to cover up Foley's face. So he was shown several designs for a new heel character, a man with a leather mask and chains called Mason the Mutilator. Foley didn't like the name, so he came up with Mankind, which McMahon approved. And from there, from that leather mask and that boiler room, one of wrestling's most iconic careers took shape. In a notoriously brutal Hell in a Cell match versus The Undertaker in June 1998, Foley subjected himself to being thrown from the top of the 16-foot-high cage onto a table, chokeslammed through the cage top, and flung to a thumbtack-covered mat. The unforgettable image of Foley's body artlessly plummeting to the ground below defined not only his career, but WWE's Attitude Era as a whole. But here's the thing about Foley that gets lost in the highlight reel of Carnage and Cage Falls. He wasn't just pain, he evolved. Following the Hell in a Cell beating, Foley turned Mankind into more of a comedic character who wielded a sock puppet named Mr. Socko. The transformation helped make him a mainstream attraction, and in late 1998, he defeated Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to claim the WWE Championship for the first time. In 1998, Foley entered the Royal Rumble 3 times, once as Cactus Jack, once as Mankind, and once as Dude Love. He is the only wrestler officially credited with entering the same Royal Rumble match multiple times. He helped WWE Raw achieve its highest ratings ever with a segment featuring himself and The Rock. The This Is Your Life segment aired on September 27, 1999, and received an 8.4 rating. Numbers that almost no television program reaches. Numbers that speak to just how deeply connected this man was to the heartbeat of that era. The hardcore legend was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame on April 6, 2013, in Madison Square Garden, the same building where, as a kid, he watched Jimmy Snuka leap from a steel cage and decided he wanted to do this for a living. By 2025, he had transitioned into a part-time role, making sporadic appearances and remaining a beloved figure, often appearing in segments, podcasts, and special events. He also took on mentorship roles, offering guidance to younger talent. So when this man, 30-plus years associated with that company, Hall of Famer, 3-time world champion, the guy who fell off a cage and got back up to win titles, when he says the association no longer lets him look at himself in the mirror, people listen, because nobody earned the right to wear that badge more than he did, and nobody had more to lose by taking it off. In his Helwani interview, Foley said he first met AEW boss Tony Khan 15 years ago and had a really good lunch with him long before Khan ever got into pro wrestling. Foley took a break from watching wrestling for a couple of years, but then became a fan of AEW and would direct message with Khan so the groundwork was laid. The relationship was real. But talks about Foley signing with the promotion didn't start until months after he announced his decision to cut ties with WWE. He wasn't using one company as leverage against another. He wasn't playing games. The WWE decision came first, for reasons entirely his own, and the AEW chapter started later. When he finally did debut, it was in Queens, New York, practically his backyard. AEW's Double or Nothing on May 24, 2026 went live from Louis Armstrong Stadium in Queens. Mick Foley made his AEW debut as a co-host with Renee Paquette during the Double or Nothing buy-in. The New York crowd gave Foley a massive ovation, and he said, without hyperbole, this is one of the biggest nights of his life. And then MJF walked out. Paquette asked Foley about the main event. MJF against Darby Allin in a hair versus title match for the AEW World Championship. MJF came out to confront Foley as he got onto the subject, declaring that no one would be shaved bald during the show. MJF called Foley Mickey and wondered why anyone should care about the opinion of someone who always failed in big spots. The crowd booed, so MJF took a shot at the New York Knicks and their chances of winning an NBA championship. Foley fired back. He conceded he lost a lot of matches, but pointed out there's a guy named Dwayne Johnson who might remember a few of his victories too. And then he leaned in on MJF's hair. Foley said MJF had wavy hair and tonight it was waving goodbye. MJF responded by kicking Foley low. Before he could follow up with the Dynamite Diamond Ring, Darby Allin ran out to make the save. It was Foley's first time in an AEW ring. He took a low blow on his debut night, and the crowd lost its mind. After the show, Foley posted to Instagram, "I am so genuinely happy to be part of AEW and to have contributed in a small way to such an amazing night of wrestling." Then he reflected on what the locker room felt like backstage. He said the energy backstage reminded him of the way WWE felt during the Attitude Era, where they were all actively pulling for each other and understood that striking out was part of the process of hitting monumental home runs. He praised AEW for making their mid-card mean something. "That's one place where I will compare the two companies," he said. "They do a much better job in the mid-card." Foley views himself as a Swiss Army knife in AEW, someone who can work as a broadcaster, help with publicity, and maybe even serve as a manager. He's not ruling out the possibility of one last match in AEW, but says the stars would have to align perfectly. He's been clear that he didn't close the door on WWE forever. "As long as this man's in office," he said, "I think more and more people are realizing that some of the things he's doing are just cruelty for the sake of cruelty." He ended the interview with a message that had nothing to do with wrestling at all. It's never too late to do the right thing. The best time to have made your voice heard would have been earlier, but the second best time is now. Mick Foley spent his career getting thrown off cages, put through tables, and buried in thumbtacks. He wore 3 different masks for 3 different characters and made the world fall in love with all of them. He gave WWE everything, and when he decided the cost of staying was too high, when he looked ahead and imagined his grandkids asking questions, he walked away from the easy money. Some people talk about standing for something. Foley did it at 60 years old, with a Legends deal in one hand and a letter to Santa to write with the other. And now he's all elite, and by every account, happier for it.